job. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Chairman Jarmak, Secretary Prague, welcome. And, you know, it's great to be up here, and what a difference 2 years makes, that's for sure. You know, I just love coming to the Second Congressional District conventions. It's like a party with your best friends in the world to be here, and just looking around the room. Thank you. You know, Comptroller Wyman and all the public officials and state reps and state senators, all the people from the town committees and folks, organized labor that's here. It is really just a privilege and an honor again to stand in front of you as your nominee. And I want to first of all start by making sure that I begin at the important place, which is to recognize the people who were with me in this journey, which really started 5 years ago. To win this incredible seat in this incredible part of Connecticut. And I want to start by introducing my wife Audrey and my son Bobby and daughter Elizabeth. These conventions, for some of you, has been an opportunity to watch Bobby and Elizabeth grow up. They're now officially both teenagers, and you'll be glad to know they're going to work hard in the campaign, but when we're at home, like any other well-adjusted American teenager, they treat their parents with merciless sarcasm at any weakness and foible, and I love having them here, and in particular, my wife Audrey, who has just been an amazing person to hold it together through 2 long, very difficult campaigns, and then to just pivot from that to dealing with the huge change in our life, in setting up a life in Washington. And every day she still takes care of Connecticut's children at St. Francis Hospital, Wyndham Middle School, and I just want to publicly say thank you, and I love you very much. You know, when you get elected to Congress, you are all alone. You are just without staff, without anybody there after the vote is finally tallied. And one of the first things that we worked very hard to do was to actually put together a staff in Washington and in Norwich. And I want them all that are here tonight to stand up and wave to the crowd and be recognized because of the amazing work that they are doing every single day for the 2nd Congressional District. And I want to thank our nominator and seconding speeches. Trey McPherson, as he said, just graduated yesterday, and we had a lot of fun down in Washington when he was making sure that the Congress's feet were held to the fire on the College Cost Reduction Act. He is off to law school next year, and I completely predict with absolute certainty that we're going to be reading about Trey sometime real soon in terms of public life. Kenny Delacruz is somebody who 2 years ago was under a lot of pressure, frankly, not to support my candidacy. The conventional wisdom down in southeastern Connecticut was to go the other way. He, as he said, got up at the crack of dawn to make sure I was at the factory gate shaking hands every morning. And, you know, those are the kind of decisions and commitments that, you know, you should never forget, and I never will. And I want to thank him for his kind words here tonight. And Fran Durga, what a great speech, and it's great to see you here. We first met on a snowy day in Norwich at the Vet Center where I would just say to all of you, it was just an extraordinary session to see the pain and the disappointment that so many of the people who have served this country feel about the way they're treated by the Veterans Administration. And it just added to the determination of our office to make sure that we were going to work as hard as we could for people like Fran. And the fact that he is a diehard Yankees fan and that we still work for him anyway is certainly a testament. I also want to just again, 2 years ago was an extraordinary campaign, and Edith was one of the nominators in that convention. We had who else was with us there that day? It was. Well, I was just going to mention him in a minute, but it was Edith gave a great speech. But as some of you may remember, 2 years ago, we had just an amazing speech that was given by a guy named Ken Goldsmith from Woodstock, Connecticut. He began his speech by introducing himself as a Navy Reserve pilot who had landed planes on the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln 50 times, which was 49 more times than George W. Bush ever did, and really electrified the convention with a speech about, again, what happened to the Guard and Reservists whose lives have been turned upside down by this never-ending war, and the fact that their health benefits and his wife with a chronic condition was uncovered because TRICARE was not extended to Guard and Reservists, and despite the fact that he appealed to my predecessor, was unsuccessful in getting his vote in that effort to treat Guard and Reservists with simple fairness. Well, we thought it would be great to have Ken come back here tonight to talk about the change that's taken place with the new Congress, which Fran did a fabulous job talking about. And Aaron Clark in my office sent him an email and a phone call to see if he could join us. And I just wanted to read to you the response that we got from him. Greetings. I'm very honored that he thought of me again. Please thank Joe. However, I'm afraid I won't be able to attend this year since I am currently in Ramadi, Iraq. I was mobilized early this year to serve as an operations officer for Task Force Ramadi, a joint command responsible for operations and security on Camp Ramadi and support for provincial reconstruction efforts in El Anbar province. Although this area is considered one of the, quote, success stories, close quote, of the war, we still have our daily share of IEDs, suicide truck bombs, rocket attacks, and small arms fire. In fact, while I was writing this email, there was an explosion in the distance, just another average night in Iraq. Right now, I don't anticipate being back home until early fall. I have been meaning to send Joe an email telling him I was here, but as you can probably imagine, things have been pretty busy. I would appreciate it if you could pass this along to him. I'm also interested to know whether he has any plans to travel through this area on a Codell trip this year. He might want to see how the Navy, not to mention the Marine Corps, is doing in the middle of the desert. Between Joint Task Force folks, the Seabees, Navy medical staff, and a few others, there are quite a few desert sailors here now. Sorry I will miss the convention, but I will try to be there for the election night victory party. Best regards, Commander Ken Goldsmith, U.S. Navy Reserve, Task Force Ramadi. And he probably can't hear us as far away as he is, but we are going to make sure that the record reflects to Ken that we heard him and that we thank him and we are proud of him and we care about him and we want him home safe and sound for him and his family. It has been an amazing experience, as Greg Haddad said, being elected with the closest race in America. Obviously, there are far more people here tonight than my margin of victory. And going out and talking to people who feel so personally invested in this race because of the fact that they understand how their participation meant so much. A woman in East Lyme, Connecticut, who told me that she drove from Niantic to Northampton, Massachusetts on Election Day because her daughter at Smith College had forgotten to mail her absentee ballot in, so she drove up and all the way back to the town clerk's office to deliver the vote. A gentleman in Willimantic, Connecticut, who left Windham Hospital against doctor's orders because he had forgotten to send in his absentee ballot and made sure that his vote counted. But as Trey indicated, we decided to hold this convention here tonight at the campus of the University of Connecticut because there obviously was something very special that happened here in Storrs 2 years ago. When I ran and lost in 2002, 142 students voted on the entire campus. And we knew that there was something missing there. And we worked very hard. We were up here, as Trey said, many times, meeting with students, registering them, making sure that they knew that this was really going to be one of the the pivotal races that would determine control of Congress. But obviously there was something else going on because there was a receptivity that was not there in the past. And when there are now seminars in Washington, D.C. about what's happening with the 18 to 29-year-olds, I mean, you will all be very proud to know that in the PowerPoint presentations, whether it's Rock the Vote, whether it's Speaker Pelosi's caucus that she had for the New Democrats right after the election, that PowerPoint always concludes with, and in the 2nd Congressional District where Joe Courtney won by 83 votes, over 1,000 students registered and voted in the best precinct in the 2nd Congressional District. But I have to tell you, as exciting as that is, the best part of what's happened over the last 18 months, as Trey said, is to be able to go down to Washington and to be able to create real change that you can come back to the University of Connecticut campus and show that graph that was up here earlier that showed how a prior Republican Congress had completely neglected the issue of higher education. The Pell Grant frozen for 6 straight years at the same time that college costs went up 40%, raising the interest rates for the Stafford Student Loan Program, despite the fact that, again, college costs were skyrocketing. And the bill that we passed, that Trey worked so hard on, which unfroze Pell Grants, cut the interest rates from 6.8% down to 3.4%. The average student at the University of Connecticut will save $5,000 over the course of a 4-year education because of that change alone. We created a new teacher grant program so that students who make a commitment to go into teaching in high-need school districts will be entitled to an additional grant on top of Pell. That is the kind of message that coming back to a campus like this and say, you know what, when you don't get involved, this is what happens. Government just doesn't hear you, doesn't see you, and neglects you. But when you do get involved, real change can happen. And the same is true for veterans who, again, despite the fact that the other party loves to sort of show up at the parades and the events, the fact of the matter is the Veterans Administration, as that graph showed earlier, was being woefully underfunded. Backlogs up to 6 months for returning soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan to try and get into the system. At the same time, they got to pay mortgages and light bills and deal with the healthcare bureaucracy of the system. We passed the biggest increase in the history of the VA, as Fran said, made a difference in terms of raising the reimbursement, which, as he said, was disgusting, at 11 cents a mile since 1978 to 28.5 cents per mile, which we should frankly go even higher, and making sure that we are going to invest in the new needs that have been created by this conflict in terms of mental health, traumatic brain injury services, which this war will carry a burden on for this country for decades to come. But, you know, as Ed Burke, who Fran mentioned earlier, said the other day, I mean, it is true that the system is improving, but the problem is here now, and we have to deal with it now, and we have to make sure that in this election in 2008, that people get the message that when it comes to making sure that the people who wore this the uniform of this country and who've been injured or their ability to work has been damaged because of that service, it is Democrats who have stood up for the veterans of the United States of America to make sure that they get the help that they need. And lastly, I just want to, again, second and echo Kenny's remarks about the fact that working families in the middle class has just been obliterated by this administration over the last 7 years. I mean, it is, frankly, exciting that we were able to, through the armed services process, make sure that we're going to stabilize the workforce at Electric Boat, which has gone from a high of 30,000 down to 7,500 in Groton. And I brought with me today the job fair notice, which went up as a result of the budget that we passed, that EB is hiring 600 new workers. But the fact of the matter is, in whether it's energy costs, health care, paying for college, the fact of the matter is that the Bush administration and the Republican Congress turned a total deaf ear to the needs of middle class and working families, and that, frankly, is as powerful an issue that's on the ballot in 2008 as any other issue that will be confronting the people of this district or this country, and we have to make sure that they make the right decision in November of 2008. Tomorrow morning, we will be releasing some salmon, baby salmon, into the 8 Mile River, and it has really been just an amazing experience to try and fight for this legislation. You know, frankly, some of the press accounts have not quite accurately presented the fact that we had to fight like cats and dogs in the House to make sure that the 8 Mile River got through the process. If you wanted a more black and white picture of how the Republican Party, which was at one time the party of Theodore Roosevelt, has completely changed its position on the area of the environment. The 8 Mile River battle that we had to contend with Republicans on the Resources Committee was a perfect example of it. And I am very proud of the fact for the folks in East Haddam and Lyme and Salem that we, again, are going to now have a 62-acre, 62-square-mile watershed protection that will be there not only for our children but our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, and it is, again, just an incredible part of this state. I recommend it to any of you to go on down and enjoy the 8 Mile River, which will now be there forever because of the new Democratic Congress and the priorities that we brought to Washington in November of 2006. You know, it would be, elections, particularly for incumbents, are about two things. I mean, one is your record, and we've talked about that tonight, and I am looking forward to the opportunity to go out and talk about the record that we've built in the 2nd Congressional District, a progressive record, a record that is connected to the priorities and needs of the people who live in Eastern Connecticut. But as we all know, watching this incredible event, this presidential contest taking place in front of us, this election in 2008 is very much about the future of this country. And I'm going to talk briefly about 3 issues in what confronts us. And the first, of course, is the war in Iraq. A war that now has cost us $600 billion in this country, and sitting on the Armed Services Committee, which I am glad that I'm there representing the Eastern Connecticut on it. You know, we have time and time again in the committee been there holding the administration's feet to the fire and challenging the Bush, now Bush-McCain policy that exists in Iraq. And it is clear from sitting on that committee that the long-term damage that this war has done to the military readiness of our armed forces, the 2001 graduating class of West Point, half of the class left the military after completing their 5-year hitch, the highest number since the Vietnam War. We are losing the best and the brightest. They are voting with their feet. They are heading for the exits because they don't see any light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the folks that have been running this war policy for the last 5 years. And on that committee, you know, I've worked hard to make sure that the right questions get asked. As Fran indicated, we put together legislation to take care of our wounded warriors returning home and to give our over-deployed Guard and Reserve more time at home with their families. I've taken a stand against the administration's attempt to establish permanent bases in Iraq and led the charge against plans to tie our nations to a permanent security relationship long after this president is gone. And I have been steadfast in refusing to provide this president one nickel for the war in Iraq without a plan to end it and to bring our troops home. But let me be very clear. We will never accomplish this critical goal with a President McCain and a Republican Congress. At every turn, Bush, McCain, and their allies in Congress have frustrated every one of the new Congress's attempts to force this president to listen to what the American people said loud and clear in 2006. As our party gets closer to a nominee, which is very close, one thing is crystal clear. The American people will have a choice. The Bush-McCain policy of an open-ended, never-ending war in Iraq with no accountability, or a change in course by our party's nominee for president, aided by a Democratic Congress. And that choice is on the ballot right here in the 2nd Congressional District. On energy policy, I got to tell you, it has just cracked me up to watch Republicans out there moaning about the fact that we now have $4 gas that our motorists are having to pay for. As some of you know, the GOP at one point stood for Grand Old Party. Well, being down in Washington, seeing the Washington Republican Party, let me tell you, it stands for gas, oil, and petroleum. Because every single time that we have tried to challenge the oil companies' outrageous tax breaks that they were given by the prior Congress, it has been Republicans in the House and the Senate that have stood up and defended the oil companies. Every time that we have tried to pass production tax credits for renewable energy sources, which everybody in America knows we must do. We need to transform the energy policy of this country for renewables, for solar, for geothermal, for wind. We have companies bursting at the seams in eastern Connecticut that are ready to move. But what they need is that boost, that hurdle that needs to be cleared for homeowners and for small businesses. But we have a Republican rump minority in the House and the Senate that is there to defend President George Bush's vetoes of every attempt to try and get a sane energy policy in this country. And for them now to say, oh, the Democrats are responsible for high gas prices is a joke. It is an absolute joke. We have been writing to Bush to tell him to suspend deliveries to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve now for months, something he did after Hurricane Katrina when the price per barrel hit $75. We're obviously at $120 a barrel right now and gotten no response. And we're going to take a bill up tomorrow in the House, and we're going to force him with legislation to make that change. And we also know that there is speculation in terms of energy traders, the hedge fund managers that are driving up artificially the price of gas and oil. People understand, I really believe this, people understand that it is time for us as Americans to change our ways, and people are ready for that type of change. But when they see these prices going up for absolutely no reason that is connected to the cost of production or distribution, but it's just pure greed that's driving it, they deserve to have a Congress and a president who understands that and is prepared to create fair markets for consumers and for small businesses. And lastly, on health care. You know, as some of you know, this is an issue I worked pretty long hours in Hartford and got some good friends that are in the room here like Edith and Kenny Prisby and Nancy who've done great work, Bill Curry in the back, Don Williams. My first floor speech in the House of Representatives was on the Medicare Part D prescription drug issue about how we need to have a rational policy in Washington where you negotiate discounted prices, something that we did in Connecticut in 1991 and didn't hurt or damage the pharmaceutical industry, but created, again, a fair, workable mechanism for our senior citizens, again, blocked in the Senate by George Bush and his allies. The work that we did on the Wellstone mental health parity bill, again, passed that legislation through both houses, which is based on a simple principle that says that we are going to treat illness of the nervous system and the mind the same way we are going to treat illness of the physical body, which is so overdue in this country. And it's a testament to Paul Wellstone's memory that this was the year that we got that legislation through both houses. And the Pre-Existing Condition Exclusion Act, which Kenny mentioned, which says that we are not going to have a health care system which discriminates against people by virtue of the fact that they just simply got sick or have disease, which is something that which all of us as human beings do experience and will experience sometime in our lifetime. That is fundamentally an immoral way to create a health care system, and we need to make that change to eliminate that type of discrimination. I mean, I could go on and on, but what I want to do in terms of just framing the issue of health care and what's on the ballot this year is to talk about what happened in Towne, Connecticut about 3 or 4 weeks ago, which some of you may have read about or even been at. On a Saturday, about a month or so ago, the Connecticut Dental Society opened the doors of the Old Town Middle School for a free dental clinic. And what they basically said is we're going to have 180 dentists, we're going to have dental hygienists available, operatories, and no questions asked. You can just come in and get help. It was very modestly advertised. There was a couple PSAs on Channel 3 and in the newspapers. And the doors were scheduled to be open at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. And what happened instead was that starting at 6 o'clock the prior evening, people started lining up to get their turn. By 3 o'clock in the morning, hundreds of people had already shown up and were waiting in the cold and the dark for their turn. By 5 o'clock, the Connecticut State Police showed up to start turning away cars because the parking lot was a complete disaster. At about 6:30 in the morning, the heavens opened up and it started thundering and lightning. I mean, Audrey and I, we live just a couple miles away there. I mean, it was just a huge downpour. And nobody would leave their place in line because they were afraid. They were afraid to lose their place in line because they needed to have a tooth pulled or a filling or a cleaning for either themselves or for their kids. And it really was one of the most overwhelming events that I've ever seen as a public official, was to go into that school and to see families waiting there patiently for their turns. And reading the newspaper accounts, a woman who got turned away by the state police, who was 67 years old, who had a tooth that needed to be pulled, and they asked her, "What are you going to do?" And she said, "I'm going to go home and pray for help." Well, you know what? I think it's time that we can say to our seniors and to the American middle class to get up off your knees and to have a government in Washington that understands that it is time for us as an industrialized country in the world to have a health care system that is accessible and available for every single American. And again, to bring it back to what's on the ballot this year in November, we have a president who for the last 12 months has had sitting on his desk a children's health insurance piece of legislation, and we've all seen some of the press accounts. It's going to raise it to a certain percentage of poverty rate. But what that bill really is about is the fact that it was enhancing and strengthening mental health coverage for our kids and giving them better dental care. And you talk to any dentist and they will confirm exactly what I'm saying. George Bush has vetoed that measure twice. That veto has been sustained every single time in the House of Representatives by a margin of about 6 or 7 votes. I have an opponent who is now publicly on record saying that he would have voted to sustain that veto as well. Well, you know what? I know this district. I know Eastern Connecticut. That's not the kind of representation we need in Washington, D.C., and I will make sure I'm going to work like a dog between now and Election Day to make sure that never happens. I'm getting the stink eye from my daughter Elizabeth here that it's time to start wrapping this up. So I just want to say that, you know, I love this district. It has just been such an honor every single day that I've been a member of Congress to say that I represent the 2nd Congressional District. And as I said earlier, the way we fought so hard and the way every single phone call and every single leaflet and every single door-to-door contact meant so much in terms of making sure that we got elected. I mean, at first I was sort of, you know, when people were calling me landslide, I was like, you know, are they dissing me here a little bit? But you know, the fact of the matter is that I embrace it. It'll be on my tombstone, you know, that it really was just an amazing, remarkable event that all of us as a family really went through in 2006 when the whole country was watching us for 2 weeks while every single town like Ashford and Summers and Lebanon, Lebanon, don't get me started, where we lost 100 votes, was going across the scroll on CNN. But I will tell you, I am grateful for every minute that I've had to have the honor to represent, again, such a wonderful part of the country and of the state of Connecticut. And it is with a full heart and so much desire to go out and finish the job we started in 2006, that I accept your nomination for Congress in 2008. Let's go out and win.